Okay, so our talk's called Freely Associating Autonomous Cats. And this phrase actually was a phrase that one of our friends posted in our Facebook group to describe us, and we thought it was a cool title. So, I'm Sarah Honeychurch, I live in Scotland, and this is Ash from Vancouver, Rebecca from California, Maha from Egypt, and we also have Len from Guyana who can't be with us today. And we became friends during a CMOOC last year called Rhizo14. So what was Rhizo14? Well, Rhizo14 was all over the place. There was an official community calls platform called P2PU. The announcements were put there, some of us did a bit of discussion, but pretty soon we dropped it. It just wasn't a place we wanted to go. There was a Twitter hashtag that was very heavily used, Rhizo14. There was a G+ group, I believe, don't know much about it. There was a Facebook group, which was the place that we all really gelled together. And there were personal blogs, and there was more than a Dijo group, Mendeley, there was Pinterest, there was loads and loads and loads of stuff going on. But basically, all of us gelled together in the Rhizo14 Facebook group. So, I was going to start by asking you a couple of questions. Who here uses Facebook? Most of you. Who uses Facebook professionally? Not so many. Who understands the difference between a Facebook profile, page, and a group? Fair amount. And who understands Facebook's privacy settings? Yeah. Depends when you ask. Okay. So, we struggle about what to call ourselves. Are we a community, a collective, a swarm, a group, anything like that? And we've been puzzling about this for quite a while. Len, who can't be here today, has put together a few slides that I'm going to now try and summarise and read out. So what we think is that really when we talk about being a community, we use the word community without knowing what it means. It's a placeholder. So in the literature, there's a fair few different comparisons that we've been looking through to see if we can find what we are. Now, are we a group? Well, groups are defined by being a unity. And really, the Rhizo14 people are so diverse. Networks, well, networks are defined by diversity. But networks seem a bit cold to describe how we feel about each other. What else do we have? Communities and collectives. Len and I thought maybe the C. Brown and Thomas would be useful here. So communities, we like this. In a community, you learn to belong. It's about conformity. Whereas in a collective, you belong to the collectives in order to learn. So if we're part of a learning collective, we're doing something together because we want to learn, rather than because we see ourselves as homogenous. Maybe there's something in that. Maybe we could look at the difference between communities and networks, and now I've started to lose where I am in those things. So communities have a shared identity. We're not sure that we have a shared identity. In fact, there are some people who describe themselves as being part of Rhizo14 who are very vehement about not being part of our community, but yet they still identify as Rhizo14. And we identify them as Rhizo14 as well. So again, we get back to a network. A network is a diverse identity, so maybe that's something, along with the coldness. And then there's other stuff here. You can find stuff called hierarchies. We didn't have hierarchies in Rhizo14. Even that Dave Cormier guy, who apparently was a facilitator, he wasn't any more important than any of the rest of us, as we keep telling him. Nets or networks define themselves as emerging identities. The more I think about this, the more that it's something about the network that appeals. Or sets are just collections, that doesn't look like us. Collectives. Well, collectives have something called a collective intelligence. I don't think there's one thing that all of us are. So we've been playing around with other words. We've been playing around with hives, and we've been playing around with swarms. And as soon as you say hive, then you get this idea of the broad identity. I think that's most definitely what we're not. So I'm going to hand over to Ash now.
So Sarah's done a really good job of kind of saying what Rhizo14 was and some of these questions we have around what we are actually. if we can give ourselves a term. And I'm going to focus a little more on Facebook, because that's the place where, as Sarah said, we kind of came together, but where there was the most sort of activity around Rhizo14. And okay. And I'm going to kind of look at why Facebook. And most of this is Rhizo14. I've also done research on Rhizo15, this year's incarnation. So I'm drawing a little bit on what I learned from that, but it's quite similar. The word cloud up here, so we posted on the Rhizo14 Facebook group and said that we are going to do this presentation. And can you tell us why Facebook for you? Why was it important to Rhizo14? And this is the word cloud of what people came up with. And I thought it was kind of interesting because a lot of these things like conversations and experiences did come out. So there are 4 main reasons that came out of this of why Facebook. And I'll go through each of them. But mainly, first one, everybody's there already. And yes, personally, and this was professional, and we'll trail that one a bit, the affordances of Facebook helped the bridges between the personal and professional. And then I'll talk a bit about the alternatives, the other pieces that were going on. And all these are quotes that come from people either in Rhizo14 or Rhizo15, the Rhizo15ers who did Rhizo14. So Facebook was where the action was. And people were already there. They know how to use Facebook. It's a fairly comfortable space that people know how to use technically, but they also understand sort of the social norms that go on with communicating in Facebook, so it felt like a comfortable place for them. They're already on it. Like one person says there, she's checking it in bed, in the morning, at night. She is so used to it, it's such a habit, that she didn't have to go out of her way to learn a new technology or to fit it in, because the time demands made by these courses often is a lot for people. So this is one way of sort of mitigating those time demands. And people saw it as sort of the conversational space. So there's something about Facebook that allowed easy conversations to develop. And a lot of people mentioned the threaded conversations. So you can see who was posting, who was replying. You could go away and come back to it and find it again, whereas things like Twitter just disappeared so quickly. And there was also the public group where everybody in Rhizo could see, but Facebook messages became sort of the private part where you can easily contact and have a private conversation about a topic that interested you. Or somebody pointed out that once they'd posted something on Facebook, on the group, that got taken the wrong way. And somebody sort of hijacked the thread and went off in a funny direction when she wanted a serious conversation. So she was able to resolve that by using a private message feature. So things like that Facebook does already kind of seem to help. Also the idea that it's multimodal. So there were pictures where you communicate visually, by video. A lot of people would post links to their blog post. So coming from somewhere else, they'd put it here, they could pull all the pieces together and then comment there instead of having to go to individual blogs. The idea of notifications. So people said they didn't have to go out and search for the Rhizo stuff. It came to their email or it came to their phone and told them when there was somebody there wanting to talk to them. And Facebook as a group, and as Sarah asked, understanding the idea of how a Facebook group works. And it did get that idea of a boundary, of something you joined and therefore had a bit of a commitment to, both the people in the group and the idea of the group, the topic of the group. And that seemed to foster a little bit of cohesiveness in it. And then there's this idea of Facebook as the water cooler. And both Rebecca and Maha are going to talk to this a bit. So most of you said you use Facebook personally and professionally. And it was a boundary I had to cross as well. And so we got to know each other a little bit in the Rhizo group. And it led to these deeper connections. So we'd start talking about Rhizo stuff, but then someone would share something else that was interesting to them, or they would friend somebody, and they'd see their profile, and you get a more rounded picture of an individual than you do just knowing them professionally. And it sort of deepened these relationships that, really, like our friendships here, have come out of a Facebook group. And compared to the other places, so Twitter, a huge following on Twitter with the Rhizo14 hashtag, but it kind of seemed to be a very empty sort of space. There was no boundaries, and the Rhizo14 tweets that people were seeing would go by quickly. There was hard to have a conversation, especially with a character limit. By the time you tag the people you're interested in, you can fit in one word, and it wasn't nearly enough. They also people talked about blogs, which were really useful and very good for longer form thoughts, but a blog is a very formal space where you have to think about what you're going to say, and you have to, if you want to comment, you have to read and reflect and think about what you're going to post. And it is very open with a very wide audience, same as Twitter. You don't really know who you're talking to. In the Facebook group, we did sort of have an idea of who was there. G+, as Sarah said, yeah, there was a Google Plus group, and there were a few people when I spoke to them who were very passionate about it, thought it was a wonderful group, but it never seemed to reach a critical mass. And as others said, often what was posted in the Google group also showed up in Facebook. So everyone was sort of just wanted to stick to the Facebook space. And kind of what I pulled out of it is the idea of place versus space. And so Twitter and blogs really seemed like space, very wide open, whereas the idea of a place that's sort of tangible and bounded and comfortable was what a lot of people associated with Facebook. So that was all I was saying about that. Rebecca, I'm turning it over to you. I will press button for you.
So I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about sort of the lived experience of being in Rhizo, and part of how this community changed for me. And it was started with a simple friend request. Just towards the end of Rhizo14, Mahabali sent me this friend request. Happy that it went to my email so I could actually get the actual one with the actual date. So April 3rd, 2014 was when she sent me the friend request. And interestingly enough, after we were talking about this, we discovered that she actually learned that technique from Sarah. So Sarah had friended her the same way. So rather than just sending a friend request, it's sent with sort of a little bit of, I think I'd like to be your friend if you're willing to accept me into your private Facebook space. And so it meant sort of, I was honored. When I got this, I was like, Kichiki honored. Like, wow. The great Mahabali is enough to be a friend. And so with that sort of, it changed, it blurred that boundary between the colleague and the friend, right? The personal private space became blurred in that. And I want to actually go a little bit further, if you want to flip to the next slide, and talk a little bit about these items because they're quite meaningful to me. So very shortly after that, about a month later, actually, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the Rhizo community became a caring community for me. And so they made that other step where people from Rhizo, this is a picture of the scarf that Mahabali sent me and the socks that Sarah knit me, and the little bird that was sent to me by Bonnie and Dave and their kids. But it was just, it sort of demonstrated sort of that step further, right? We became way more than just professional colleagues and a learning community. And now up front,
The great Mahabali.
the great Mahabali.
So I'm going to talk about what might be wrong with Facebook, right? And I'm sure a lot of you already have some of these things on your mind. So did we find anyone who's not on Facebook in this team? Okay, I didn't realize you weren't on Facebook. Okay. So there was Kevin Hutchison, who was a very, very active member of the Facebook community, wasn't on Facebook, and there are quite a few people who aren't on Facebook for ethical reasons. Can you tell us why you're not on Facebook?
Mostly the whole notion of the fact that Facebook owns everything that's there, and not comfortable with that. So,
Would anybody else want to share why they're not on Facebook?
Somebody over here.
Yes.
Yeah, I just don't want to put my personal life online.
Okay.
I'm professional life online.
Fair enough.
and I blur private and public without any problem on my blog and Twitter and elsewhere.
Okay, but just not on Facebook because of
So that's two different.
Okay, so it's very two different.
Yeah.
Very different. So Kevin has ethical issues with Facebook, and he doesn't want to have a Facebook account. But the Facebook group we had was an open Facebook group. Do you all know what that would be like? An open Facebook group means the people who are my friends, or Sarah's friends, or Rebecca's, or Ash's friends, who are not in the group, would see my post inside that group. And so this means that there were people who weren't part of Rhizo14 who could read these posts. So I had my friends at work and everywhere asking, what's this all about? Whereas people who are in Rhizo14 doing the MOOC, but who are not on Facebook, couldn't access it. And so sometimes one of us would blog something and say, as we were talking about on Facebook, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes you don't say, as we were talking about on Facebook. You would say, as Sarah said, and you'd link to the Facebook post. And so Kevin would click that, and he'd get a login screen. because he can't get in, because it's not public to the extent that you don't have to log into Facebook. So that login screen got in the way of him finding out what was happening inside, and it always made him feel like there was something he was missing, a part of the conversation. And actually, just a quick thing about that. So this time in Rhizo14, I decided not to overdo the Facebook, because I didn't want people like Kevin to miss out on too much. And so that personal professional lines that we've been talking about earlier, how many people use a different Facebook account for professional stuff than for personal stuff? Because a few people do that. How many people won't use Facebook professionally because they use it socially? Okay. So that's definitely a concern for quite a few people. Apparently several of us had it. At first I didn't understand that if I'm on a Facebook group for professional stuff that they can't see my profile if I make it private. Of course, Facebook keeps changing the settings, but generally I didn't, at the beginning I didn't realize that I could have to be just in the Facebook group, that they wouldn't see my personal stuff. But also near the end it became what I liked about it. It became, I wanted to make friends in this course beyond the professional aspect, and to be friends with these people and have dinner with them when I come here, and to introduce them to my child, and to see what's happening to their own kids. And because that's the way I am in my professional life too. I like to make friends with people that I know professionally, but that issue still exists for some people. They don't want to blur that. If someone has a really hyper life and they use Facebook for that, they might not want their employers to see that, or their PhD supervisor to see that, or whatever, and they don't want to blur those lines. And there's, of course, the questionable ethics of Facebook. And like everybody here, when we mentioned the privacy settings, is that they keep changing them. So whatever it is that they say they're doing, they keep changing that, and they don't tell you, and you don't know what's happening. And that's not a small matter. And maybe it's something that we downplay sometimes, but it's still a big issue that people have a right not to want to put themselves through all that. And the information overload. So if you're not, and of course this is an issue with all kinds of online learning, right? Like you get, does anybody not get information overload from the internet? Yeah. So with the Facebook is that you might find yourself, if you're offline for a day or you're traveling for a couple of days, and you come back and you find 50 notifications, and you feel like you're missing out on all of that. But the thing is, obviously you don't have to get into everything. It's a MOOC, you don't have to do everything that's there. But it's just a sense that you might have missed out on a lot of things, and sometimes somebody posts something, a lot of people reply, and you get all these notifications, and it gets a little bit overwhelming. So that's one of the things that drove people crazy. And then the points that Sarah, somebody was talking about how you're on Facebook and you comment on the blog on Facebook, and that sort of distributes the conversation. Some people are responding to a blog on the blog itself. Some people are responding to it on Facebook. Some people are just retweeting it with a small comment. And so when you go in to read a blog post, you don't actually know what everyone has been saying about it. And so there are people you know who have written about it on Facebook, but you're writing on the blog, and the conversation they're not reaching each other. And so that was an issue also for some people. And then for someone who's doing research, for example, you go to the blog and you see those comments, it's much more difficult to go back to the Facebook group and find out what people said about it. And then that's the difficult thing to do. Does anybody else find that a bit difficult to follow through? Has anybody been through that situation where you can't see all the comments on it?
Yeah, I think I'm not happens all the time. You kind of try to, it's archaeological undertaking, so sometimes to find out where things originated. So
Yeah.
I think I've been through that.
And that actually deciding, like for example, deciding where you want to which posts to comment on Facebook and which ones to comment on the blog. And sometimes we're commenting on something where we don't know the author, so we just talk on Facebook because it's a friendly conversation. Versus when we do know the author, then we comment on their blog, but then sometimes it's actually all over the place, and it's very difficult to remember where everything is. And also, even though some of us found the conversations enriching, and we found that the social cohesion was a good thing, it wasn't the same for everyone. Some people, like Nick, who was a very big part of both Rhizo14 and 15 in his own way, wasn't on Facebook the first time around. He tried Facebook the second time around, and he didn't find it as rich, and he thought it wasn't rhizomatic. And we haven't defined what rhizomatic is, but I guess he thought it was just like too
Striated.
Striated streets. That's even more difficult to explain.
I know.
But then it didn't feel the same for every person. Possibly, I don't know if it's because he generally wasn't a keen Facebook user, or if he'd rather go branch out and find his own stuff rather than go to one place and find it. That's how he So we'd like to know what you guys think. Open up the discussion. Yes? You're saying what?
Any questions?
Yes, Chrissy.
It's not going to be some of you because I've met you online.
Chrissy was with us at the beginning of Rhizo14.
Can we ask who was Rhizo14 or 15 here, who participated in some way? Okay, only a couple.
Okay.
I just want to have a number of questions. I'm just going to ask one of them. What's your main motivation to be in these places and make these connections, which move, it seems like, or combine the professional and the personal? And it was quite interesting, Maha, that you showed these personal items and you know the gifts that you have exchanged. What's your main motivation?
So for me, I wanted to be with the cool kids. I actually found out about Rhizo. I found out about Rhizo14 at the MOOC Research Initiative conference that was in Dallas. At the bar one night, Dave was talking about the conference that he was doing, and I just wanted to be part of it.
For me, it started, I just finished my PhD before joining Rhizo14, and I was asking my friend Jesse Stommel from Hybrid Pedagogy, and I was telling him, I'm looking for people who talk about e-learning in non-traditional ways. I don't want people who talk about instructional design and the step linear process and all that. That's not me. I like critical pedagogy and I want to try something different, but I want someone who talks about EdTech in that way. And he introduced me to Dave, and I knew about this space. Now, why did I go into Facebook and blur those professional and social lines? It wasn't an intention. I think we had so many deep conversations throughout the course that I felt like I don't want to stop knowing these people after 6 weeks. And so part of it is professional, that we've written a lot of stuff together. We've done several conference presentations together, even though we weren't all in the same room. Like, this is the first time there were 4 of us in the same room, I think. But it's also, I care about them. I've just come to care about, like, you know, by the time Rebecca was diagnosed, she was someone really important to me, and everybody is really important to me personally. It's just, you know, the blurring happens because I care, not because I intend to blur it.
So I started Rhizo14 because I wanted to get to know more about Dave Cormier and Dolores Guattari. So the D&G didn't work out too well for me.
My fault.
And I guess I didn't really know who Dave Cormier was. I heard the name, and I was starting my PhD in just different ways of open learning. And I thought, okay, rhizomatic learning, that will fit, and I like looking at MOOCs, so I dove into this, and then, I kind of came to it a bit of a different way then.
Yeah. I mean, I still make connections with people on Twitter. I mean, like Catherine was saying, I still make connections with people on Twitter that are personal, professional, blurred. But the first one was this one, the Facebook Rhizo14. Ever since then, I think all of us sort of are much more active online.
And I've always been very active on Facebook, personally. And it was scary for me. And I think Sarah might have been the first who sent me a friend request, and I thought, oh my God, they're going to see who I am personally, not professionally. Like, this is, But yeah, no, I accepted, and then immediately went to my privacy settings and made sure I, kind of blocked out some people or what I was showing. But and I'm over it now. I mean, by the time you see that request, I'm like, sure, see my life, whatever.
How has the experience that you just described influenced your teaching and your work with students?
It's a good one. I use Twitter with my students, and I ask other people that I know, and I think you've done this for me once, where my students design educational games, and I do a Twitter scavenger hunt with them just to show them a game that isn't a typical board game or card game. I'm probably not going to do that this semester, but what I did like doing very much this semester is I let them blog their game designs and have people from my network respond to them so that they know that they can get ideas from people other than just me. And that's really important for them to start to think about what kind of resources they could tap into outside of the classroom and outside of Egypt. And I also bring them Egyptian game designers, so they know there are people in Egypt doing this, but they also know they can ask for help outside, and that people are nice. And I wish that one day I'll get them to read an article and get the author to interact with them, because that'll also, I think, have a really good impact.
I think I've become more of a whole person I've got about 40 Facebook groups for undergraduate students, and I used to be quite standoffish and professional, and now I don't care so much. They can just see me, I'm Sarah, because I don't see it so much of a staff issue anymore. And it's actually made the Facebook communities a lot friendlier, the students are a lot more relaxed, because they know they can have a joke with me.
I'm actually doing something a bit different. With my students, I'm looking at what we call swarm writing. So some of the projects that we come to, we do around Google Docs, and we get a bunch of us together and we just write. And we've created autoethnographies, we've created a bunch of really awesome papers that we're trying to get
Not
published.
necessarily get published. Nobody understands what it is, what we're doing.
But what's really rich within that is that it's changing group work in, I teach in an online class, and it's a way to demonstrate truly collaborative group work instead of cooperative group work. Because the typical, oh, we're going to do a joint paper, divide and conquer method versus, no, we're actually going to collaboratively work on this text where we're all working on the text at the same time is something that it's been through this Rhizo experience that I've experienced it, and so now I'm trying to pass that along to my students.
But it's hard when they don't have the community.
But yeah, so it'll be an interesting see how it works with this structured swarm writing, yeah.
Martin had a question.
Yeah, I kind of saw Rhizo. Dave called me at some point. And I think this is a really fascinating thing to watch. I think most educators would love to have that kind of commitment that you have. But I felt that a lot of people who really enjoyed it, successful, were experienced learners, and a lot of them had kind of online profiles. So I'm seeing also that point that Jonathan was talking about, learning to kind of very vulnerable positions. So I wanted to get your thoughts about, and perhaps some of the people who didn't like it also, about what we were talking about earlier, some of the people who are strong reactions to some courses.
There were a lot of people who did.
Whether you felt for level 1 undergrad, so are there elements that would work, elements that wouldn't work, do you feel, from your approach?
It was overwhelmingly educators of some form, librarians was another big group. And yeah, the experiences were not uniformly good, and people did feel sort of alienated in a lot of ways, partly by the technology, especially if they weren't very familiar with social media. Not actual physical button pressing, but the social norms around it. A lot of people felt excluded by that. And it was, there's a lot in MOOCs about how you have to be a very self-directed learner, but this, how distributed it was, took self-directed learning to a whole different level. And I've thought about that. I teach teacher educators, and I've thought about how I use this with my students. And even at that level, they're still learning how to learn, which really leaves them struggling in this. And it's a very good thought of where can you start this. And I think it's partly the idea of shifting the whole system. So we are teaching younger people how to learn, so they can experience this if they so choose.
And then, there were also people, you said socially, because some people thought there was a cliquish kind of discourse where or a big group of us who are very vocal were going towards a certain direction and talking in a certain way about, which was dissenting from tradition, but within our group was the core way we talked. And that sort of excluded some other people from that kind of conversation. So not only were we educators who were mature, but also ones who thought it in a certain way, and that other people might not want to think in that way and might not be able to participate in that way. And then also there were some things that we did that, like, we have a hacking culture where we take something and we change it and we do something with it, and not everybody's interested in that, not everybody's interested in artistic, and you weren't interested in Rhizo14 artistic stuff that we used to do. Some people said that they would be offended if they posted something and it was hacked. And that's sort of the culture of play. We were playing, we weren't. And but you said, like, some people manage that privately. It
comes back to that idea of community. Like, do we all have to have the same ideals, the same norms, the same beliefs and stuff like that?
But I think of myself as a culturally very different person, in a very different context than everybody else, and I felt very, very welcome. But I know that not everybody felt that way. That any of us could have done anything to push someone away without meaning to.
No, we've got time for one more question, I think.
Okay.
You started out querying a lot of different terms, group, networking, and so on. So have you alighted on anything, or are you very happy for it to be?
Well,
It sounds like you draw from a number of different.
we tend to call ourselves a swarm, even though I hate it, because the one thing, I'm going to say D&G now, the thing about the rhizome in Deleuze and Guattari is it's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. So the cat and the baboon can be a rhizome, as can the orchid and the wasp. So the thing I don't like about the swarm is it sort of implies that everybody's the same species.
And we still tend to use the word community, and we've used it a lot here,
Yeah.
even though we cannot to, because the way Dave called the course was Rhizo14, the community is the curriculum.
Yes.
And the next one was about community again.
Yeah.
So he uses the term a lot, so we can tend to use it.
I mean, it's something we're still troubling, and I think we all agree needs to be troubled in these sort of learning experiences. Is what do we mean by community?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.